I'd like to start today by doing a little practical task for which it requires strawberries. Okay, so there's nothing better than audience participation that's pre-planned. So we've got Bill down here. So Bill, can I ask you to take a strawberry? Reassure you they have been washed. And then Charlene and Annette at the back, either one of those, or they can pitch in together, can have a strawberry each. So what I would like to ask our very kind participants for volunteering, even though I practically had to, folks. No, I didn't. Meant to. But what I would like to do is I would firstly ask Bill to just, in a few phrases or sentences, just to tell us what his experiences are of a strawberry, what his view of strawberries are, memories, any nice memories of strawberries?
When I was asked to do this, my very first thought, which I think is indicative, is of when I was about 11, the family, and we loved strawberries, but we didn't have very much money and we didn't often have them, but we went strawberry picking in Derbyshire, somewhere like Uttoxeter, where it was a pick your own, and I remember stuffing my face full of these things, but also associating it with my uncle asked me to go off and get... Am I upsetting the baby? I do that with humans. A very uncle who I was very fond of asked me to go off and buy him an ice cream, or buy us an ice cream, and they didn't have any ice creams for sale, so I came back with a can of Coke, and he was very disappointed by that. So there's a sense of disappointment as well.
Yeah.
And I don't know why I've got that negative memory, but that was the first thing that came into my mind.
Oh, that's really interesting. So kind of a bit of positive, but definitely a negative memory associated with that. That's really interesting. Okay, so really this picture here we have, what's being presented here is, I guess, a bubble demonstrating someone imagining a strawberry. In one picture we have someone who sees a strawberry as red, and the other picture we have the same shape and structure of a strawberry, but it's green. And I guess when you look at a strawberry, or when you look at anything, whether it's a much more complex concept like autism, when you look at something, everyone has a unique perspective based upon their own perceptions, attitudes, and experiences. And sometimes I often wonder, how do we know that the person we're communicating with has the same experience, the same perceptions that we do? So for me, when I think of a strawberry, these are some of the things that I put together. So most certainly it would have to be cream tea down at the very bottom. I also have this association to Valentine's Day, probably because you see them pop up all over the shops, chocolate covered strawberries. Calpol, does anybody remember getting strawberry Calpol when their kid's not feeling too well? The Beatles, Strawberry Fields Forever. I'm not a particular fan of the Beatles, but that's something that stays in memory. And I think there was an old nightclub in Glasgow called Strawberry Fields a few years ago, but it's no longer there. And for me, particularly pertinent at the moment, I have a slight obsession with a game called Farm Heroes. So that's one of my reward games, and it's where you kind of have to collect sort of things like strawberries, carrots and onions. It's like an app you can get, and that's something that I really enjoy and helps ground me. But also gardening. I've had many family experiences of going to pick strawberries and feeling really sick before you've even got to the point where you're going to pay for the strawberries you've picked. So really just to say that we all have different experiences and memories related to one single object. So in that sense, that object doesn't hold one objective truth. It means different. It has multiple meanings for different people. And similarly, when we think about more complex things in society, one, for example, being autism, it depends who you speak to, what autism means, what the needs of autistic people are. and what the challenges of autistic people face. So a couple of pictures here, so depending on whether you're a politician, depending on whether you are a government official or a strategy member, if you're an NHS worker, clinician or a social worker. We've got a picture here of the sign guidelines, so might be particular memories or associations for researchers as well as clinicians. And then we've got Baron Cohen, just as a real classic example, who coined that infamous phrase, male brain, to do with autism. And then Mental Welfare Commission for Scotland as well. They will all have their own unique perspectives on how they view autism. What do you see here? There's a lot going on in this picture, isn't there? For one thing, we can see that there's a lady at the very back, and she's sitting with a laptop. It certainly looks like a kitchen, because over here on the right hand side we've got like a fridge, and then on the left here we've got a bit of counter, there's a kettle. But depending on who you are, your experiences, your views and perceptions of the world will determine how you come to understand or relate to this picture. So if I was a social worker, I might look at this picture and say, wow, this lady really needs some social support, she needs help. Perhaps there could be even questions about what legislation's in place that might support this lady. Maybe adult support and protection might be a question for a social worker. But what if that person was a psychiatrist? What would a psychiatrist see this as, categorise it as? So perhaps, given psychiatry use medical model, they might actually want to look at this and categorise it in terms of a disorder or a condition that's treatable. If it was a psychologist looking at this, they might say, wow, I wonder if this lady's had any past trauma, had any difficulties in her life that's led to the point at which she's unable to cope. And certainly, given that Bill's just been speaking about executive functioning, there might be an issue here of executive functioning. 30 years ago, this would not have been classified formally as a problem in terms of medically. Socially, it would have been seen as problematic for the person, but it wouldn't have been categorised as a social challenge or a problem that needed support or attendance in terms of what could be put in place. 30 years ago, this happened to my clinical supervisor, who I've got a great relationship with. When I was a trainee clinical psychologist, he told me a story that there was an autistic lady who had an autistic child, and that this lady really struggled to declutter, manage household tasks, and something similar to this scenario ensued for this lady. And when he went along, at that time there was no such thing as hoarding. In terms of a classification, hoarding under one of the clinical categorisations, ICD, this would be classified as an anxiety disorder, and then the subcategory would be hoarding. But at that time in the NHS, this wasn't considered a medical or a psychological issue. And when he went along there, he recognised that there was nothing he could do to support this family, because it was not considered or defined at that time through the eyes of health or social care to be a significant problem. Now, that's not the case. We have research, a lot more research, to indicate that this type of issue is often related to post-traumatic stress disorder as well. That some sort of trauma in the person's early years has meant that they find it really difficult to let go of things that they feel belong to part of who they are and their sense of identity. But also, as Bill's covered today as well, executive functioning and avoidance of the demands that are required to put in place a sequence of task planning and so on, that avoidance might get out of control to the point where someone or a family can be living in this sort of clutter. And I don't know if you agree with me, but living in an environment like this is certainly not going to support someone's holistic health and well-being. In fact, just looking at this picture might even induce a level of anxiety for some of you. I know it certainly does for me. I mean, I wouldn't know where to begin if I needed something. So at this moment in time, a lady who is experiencing this difficulty would get support, because now it is seen, viewed and classified as something that can be amenable to support. And although I don't like to use the word treatment, but psychological support or perhaps even medication if necessary. The reason why I felt it was so important to give you a context of how others view situations is that the biggest piece of advice I could give any of you is to always remember that depending on who is the listener, depending on the communication partner, that will vary how someone understands and relates to any challenges or difficulties you have in your life. Certainly when I was listening to Bill and Sarah as well, there was so much I was relating to, and I certainly would say that executive functioning is a huge challenge for me in my day-to-day life, and it's something that I have to work on to get a balance all the time. Now, this autistic hierarchy of needs is something that has developed not from sitting in a university and trying to figure out from a place of ignorance what will work. This autistic hierarchy of needs is something that's developed from my own understanding of what it's like to be an autistic person, which is not necessarily the same for everyone else. And so it's been important to really reflect and refine my experiences of working with other autistic people clinically and therapeutically in order to develop a holistic perspective of what the needs are of autistic people. So the reason for the kind of getting you to think about the perspectives of others is that in a healthcare system there are multiple professions. So we've got occupational therapy, psychiatry, social work. And so we must recognise that these professions are almost like little mini cultures of their own, and they are trained to recognise particular factors or variables through their eyes as a profession. And often it's the case that we in some ways need to support their understanding of how to help us. In fact, quite a lot of the time, I'm sure you will have faced challenges with trying to explain to healthcare professionals or support workers how you need support, and trying to articulate that can be extremely challenging. Have any of you had that experience? Yeah, lots of nods. Okay. So this model is designed not only to support health professionals in the context of, for example, NHS mental health service to support autistic adults, but it's also designed to have a flexible approach to it so that autistic people can use it to suit their own unique needs and to try to identify what they are and how they can work on supporting them or putting changes in place. Does that make sense so far? Okay, good. Okay, so any of you heard of Maslow? Yeah. I remember before I even went to university to study psychology, I was studying nursing. And Maslow was one of the very first models introduced within nursing. So for any of you who are not familiar with Maslow was a man who developed something, a model called the hierarchy of needs. And Maslow stated that humans are motivated at various levels of needs. Some needs are very basic and other needs are very complex and are not physical or objects but are more psychological and to do with wider issues such as belonging to part of society or a group or something along those lines. So all we've done is we've taken Maslow's original hierarchy of needs and we've adapted it to help in addressing or identifying the spectrum of needs that autistic people have, which is quite handy when you're autistic yourself, because sometimes, I don't know about any of you, but I certainly feel like I'm not quite sure, there's something bothering me, there's something that's not sitting right, but I can't quite find the words or the language to articulate that. So sometimes having a visual structure to support that can be really helpful. So the first level on the hierarchy here is orange in colour, and it's physiological needs. So physiological needs are really the most basic level, and without these needs being met, we can't really quite go on to fulfil the other needs that we may have in our life. So if you don't have a roof over your head, you don't have water or food, or you don't experience rest, then you're not going to be able to go on to some of the more complex needs like looking at relationships. So physiological needs are extremely important. So let me just, okay, here we go. So I'm just reading from a paper that I've written up with Damien Williams, and Damien Williams is my husband, who also identifies as autistic. So and he's an academic, so it's really great sitting around our house at dinner time. For some people, perhaps absolute torture. For other people, I can imagine. But we kind of used our experiences to draw this together, and also a theoretical backdrop from Maslow's original hierarchy. If you want to learn more about that, you can Google that, and it will bring up lots of information you can look at in your own time if you're interested. So physiological needs, food. So really important that we consider nutritional advice and guidance, and certainly I have to say that that's something that I speak to Katrina about quite regularly, because she's very knowledgeable in that area, and often I find that I can't quite locate where to get that information from. A lot of people may experience gut or tummy problems or food sensitivity issues, and certainly if you're an autistic person and you're dealing with a painful tummy or you're experiencing sensitivity from that, you're going to experience distress. So actually nutritional advice and getting the support you need there is so incredibly important, because if I've got an upset stomach, I can't concentrate on lots of other things that people expect me to be focusing on. And also sometimes I know Sarah said earlier that she's an avid cooker. She loves cooking, and I think ice cream is her thing. Which sounds really yummy actually, but a lot of people struggle to actually come up with ideas for food, or they might not have the skills there to engage in cooking, or there might be issues surrounding low mood, which can really affect your motivation to cook and prepare. So from that perspective, meal planning, that sort of thing, we can really ask an occupational therapist who's got that perspective on some of the day-to-day practicalities and advice and skills in terms of supporting a person to look at those specific factors. So in addition to food, rest. So there's a phrase that psychologists and health professionals speak about a lot, sleep hygiene. Which sounds really kind of unusual, I suppose, taking the phrase literally. Sleep hygiene is really a means of looking at your routines, your bedtime practices, Do you do a 5k run, get home and then jump into your bed and expect to get to sleep right away? Hopefully none of you do that. I certainly don't do that. But things like light, using tablets at night, and for a long time, you know, that game that I said that I was really into, that Farm Heroes game. For me, that was a way of unwinding, and it was something for me, like my conscious mind, just to switch off, and I did it automatically. Then realised that actually I'm not sleeping till 3 o'clock in the morning, and that light coming off of the iPad was not doing me any favours at all. So sleep hygiene is about looking at positive practices to help support your sleep. But in addition to rest, we can also think about more biological supports for rest, like melatonin. Currently on the Scottish clinical guidelines, which are the SIGN guidelines, there's no recommendation for melatonin, which is a naturally occurring hormone in your body. There's no recommendations for adults to have that in support of sleep, which can help initiate sleep and a feeling of relaxation. The child autism research states that it is very useful and can be beneficial under the right circumstances. So in terms of when you're visiting your GP or a psychiatrist or another health professional, because it's not stated explicitly in the clinical guidelines, they may not consider that as an option. But I'm going to tell you today that that is most definitely an option for you, and that you can discuss that with your health professional should getting to sleep, maintaining sleep be a problem. But melatonin isn't a one-off panacea. It's not a one-off thing that's going to solve all sleep problems. It's a very holistic approach at looking at your sleep. Shelter, so shelter, houses, homes, your bedroom, your living room. We know that many autistic people, and certainly I do, have got huge sensory sensitivity, and I have these particular light bulbs in my house that whenever someone comes in, they always say, "Gosh, it's awful dark in here," and my response is, "I know, it's great, isn't it? I just love the fact it's not really bright." So again, occupational therapy can help to support looking at perhaps your needs in terms of your home environment. I worked with a young lady who really struggled being in the shower, and we looked at this and we looked at that, and we were trying to figure out how we could help her to feel motivated to get into a shower. And it transpired that changing a bath mat from a very smooth texture to a more rough texture seemed to support her into getting into the shower. And it transpired that it was to do with the texture of that bath mat on her feet. So getting into the shower was not so much of a kind of fear kind of response for that sensory experience. So the next thing as well, particularly for autistic adults under physiological needs, is so incredibly important, is to look at mental health needs. Mental health is not necessarily physiological completely, but there is always a physiological connection to mental health, whether it be anxiety, whether it be personality disorder, whether it be depression, bipolar, eating disorder. So under this particular section, we need to have a review of risk in terms of mental health, because we need to make sure that we are assessing and making sure that there's no suicidal ideation, or there's no risk of someone harming themselves, ending their life. And it's a very difficult topic. I'm sure some of you will have had experience of feeling suicidal, because most people, even neurotypical, will have an experience of low mood and depression and feeling that they don't want to be around anymore. And it's really essential, particularly when I work in inpatient services doing consultation, that we look at the unique factors relating to mental health, and the idea that someone wants to perhaps harm themselves or end their life. So this is a really important thing to look at in terms of, can you identify yourself if you've got mental health difficulties, or do you need support to do that? And often, particularly in adult mental health services, when autistic people come into a service, they're usually there because the mental health has surfaced rather than the needs perhaps of managing autistic challenges. Does that make sense? Does that difference? Okay. So safety needs. So safety needs are also incredibly important. And the main categories under safety needs are 1, violence, and specifically looking at bullying, whether that be workplace bullying through friendship, domestic violence, and domestic violence is not only physical, that can be psychological, verbal, name-calling, manipulation, because some autistic people, because of some of the challenges with that forward planning or understanding another person's perspective, are extremely vulnerable to perhaps coercion, control and manipulation. And in addition to that, also sexual abuse. And my experience as a clinician is that a number of, or a larger proportion of autistic people are vulnerable to abuse of some kind, whether that be psychological, physical and indeed sexual, unfortunately. And so I think we really need to have a lot more research into how we prevent that in the future and how we support those people who are managing the challenges after those experiences. Monetary is also a safety need. Financial exploitation, debts, and also support to find out what they're entitled to in terms of statutory benefits. It's so incredibly important. Don't know about you, but Bill was talking earlier about opening his bank statement, but sometimes when it gets down to home insurance renewal or car insurance renewal, it feels like a bit of a minefield, to be honest. And I am in a lucky position that I have, like Bill, I have a partner, my husband, who is really on the ball with these things. In fact, so much so I think he actually enjoys it. So I do not want to interfere with his enjoyment of researching car insurance, so I'm lucky in that sense. But many people do not have that option, do not have that available support, and it can lead to consequences in terms of putting themselves in a position of signing up to financial agreement or something like that has a detrimental impact on them, not only in the short term but the long term as well. So we look at supporting people with those specific challenges, should that be something that would be helpful. Relationship needs. But autistic people, they don't like relationships. Sure, they don't really want to have relationships. They're not really people who like social contact. Is that one you've heard before? This assumption that autistic people are like, they hate having contact, they don't want to be loved or to have friendship. I don't know where that came from. Stereotypes out there somewhere. But certainly relationships can be extremely challenging, and family and friendship is something that we cover in terms of problem solving with social imagination challenges. So what ways can we help to strategise to get around some of those challenges? Love and intimacy. So love and intimacy comes conflict resolution. We all have challenges with living with our partners or our friends, whoever it may be, and so we need to be proactive in terms of volunteering communication, because quite often, in my experience personally but professionally, we can kind of hold back and wait for people to initiate something with us, whether it be conflict resolution or raising something that we need to discuss. And then also group interaction, so disclosure of what your needs are. And sometimes, as we were speaking in one of the groups we had after Bill's session, it's almost like you've got to know what your challenges are, but sometimes it's really difficult to identify what they are before you can communicate them to others. So quite a focus on developing an understanding of yourself and what your own needs are extremely important, so you can get others to help you, and that's exactly what will be needed in terms of if you want to support group interactions with others. It can be also quite tricky in terms of sharing some of your challenges with others, and that's a personal choice. Some of us might not wish to do that, or might not be ready or in a position to do that. So the next level in the hierarchy are self-esteem needs, and this is huge because confidence building is so critically important to allowing development of sense of self, and also allowing oneself to put yourself forward and believe in yourself that you can do something, whether it be a job or interacting with another person or going to the cinema if that's a really challenging experience for you. Self-efficacy, again, that's another sort of clinically kind of phrase. Some of you might be aware of it. It's really about having the confidence in your own ability to do something. So in self-efficacy needs, we need to support development of strategies, because if you feel equipped with strategies, you're going to feel more confident in doing those strategies. And again, supporting coaching to practice some of these is part of the work that we can do. And certainly it's something that we can all do in terms of, even in a family, we can support each other, or within a friendship group, to try things out if we're maybe not sure. Sense of self via others. So really interesting that I'm looking at a project just now, and quite pertinent to autism in girls and women, which is a frequent mislabelling and misdiagnosis of borderline personality disorder. Quite often, I would say at least a few times a month, I rescind borderline personality disorder diagnosis and replace it with an autism diagnosis. One of the challenges about that for diagnosticians, and also in the context of professionals who are trying to support you, is that there's something called the empathy imbalance hypothesis. Don't know if any of you have heard of that. I won't go into it in any detail. It was developed by a man called Adam Smith at University of Dundee. The empathy imbalance hypothesis is fascinating, particularly in the context of gender. People tend to experience over-empathy, but because the over-empathy is so huge, you get huge surges of anxiety. This leads to meltdowns, shutdowns. But the really interesting thing about this is that the individual themselves has no idea where the triggers are. They feel anxious or they feel an emotion, but they have no understanding of what the outside world factors or triggers are, and so they have no way of developing a preventative approach to managing that meltdown or shutdown. So this is something that I'm looking at the moment, because a lot of diagnosticians feel that that is also a marker of borderline personality disorder, but it's not. It's very, very different, and so part of my work is trying to support tearing those two features apart for clinicians. But sense of self via others, and certainly really fascinating listening to Sarah. I actually have also surrounded myself by autistic peers, and it wasn't until she was speaking about it that I actually realised, oh my goodness, I think I only have one neurotypical friend. In fact, that's even questionable. So, but yeah, so a sense of self via others, and we can provide coaching in order to enable that process to happen. Self-identity, again, is huge, and quite often sense of self-identity is lost. extremely painful, extremely confusing, and it leads to extreme significant distress. Who are you? It's one of the most fundamental human needs to know who you are. And through the process of trying to, I'm going to use these terms, camouflage, mimic, hide in order to fit in, to find a sense of belonging, when you wear that mask all the time, you almost turn into what's behind that mask, and you're not sure, gosh, do I like the cinema? Do I like tennis? Do I like strawberries? I don't know, because I've been so long pretending to be something that I'm not, that I'm not sure if I'm this person or that person. That's a really scary thing to look into, and I would say this area here, in my experience, is the most pertinent in terms of levels of anxiety, depression, and also suicidality. So this is something that needs to have, you need to kind of approach this when there's a grounding and a stability in the person's life. So you wouldn't want to be doing that if someone was homeless and didn't have the right diet, and so that's why this is further up the hierarchy in terms of identifying where we would position addressing or supporting some of those needs. Self-giving needs. Maslow's original hierarchy forgot to go into this, or certainly he wasn't sure whether to put this in his original model. But self-giving needs are about self-acceptance, progressing, resilience, and sharing with others. So I have a lady that I work with, young woman, and she is now gone through this model. She's developed all of these strategies, coping, emotional resilience, and now she is giving back in terms of she's training. She's actually a very good female boxer, but she's now giving back because she's taking a group of young autistic girls and teaching them how to box. And through that process of interaction and giving, she feels that she's passing on some of the learning that she's had with the younger people. So it's got that kind of community aspect to it, and that kind of sort of evolution aspect to passing on some of what you've learned to other people. So I'm going to go through this fairly quickly because I've only got a few minutes left. I thought it was important that I go through each of those for you. A lot of clinicians, and perhaps even autistic people, I was one of these people who used to contextualise everything as being anxiety. I didn't get my diagnosis till I was 32, so I just thought I was a walking anxious person about everything. So, I'm hoping for a promotion at work, but I'm falling behind. Oh, well, that's just anxiety that's causing these thoughts. And being awake at night is a problem for me. Well, that's anxiety. Headaches and feeling sick, label it as anxiety. Everything else on here, it seemed to be really easy for me to label it as one thing, but also it seemed to be quite easy for other clinicians and other health professionals to understand autism by labelling everything associated to it as anxiety driven. It's not the case. Each of these are colour coded, and so hopefully with a bit of luck I will remember these. So they're written at the top anyway. So this initial problem of organising workload, falling behind at work, self-esteem is the issue there. But interestingly, I have categorised executive functioning challenges as part of the self-esteem category, because if you're challenging to engage in planning, organisation, doing the diaries, or using your mobile phone as an alarm system, if you're challenging, if you're finding that challenging, then that's going to hugely impact upon your self-esteem, isn't it? And then your self-esteem is going to be low, and you're going to say, gosh, do I really deserve to go for a promotion at work? I can't do this. What am I thinking about, going for a promotion at work, for example? So learning strategies will develop one sense of self-esteem. Sleep, covered that a little bit earlier about the sleep hygiene and helpful sleeping practices. I worked with a lady once who said, Claire, I've done exactly what you said. I've cut out all my caffeine. I've not been drinking any tea or coffee at all. And I said, that's fantastic. She said, no, it's not. She said, I'm still not sleeping at night. I said, all right, okay, let's have a think then. Because this lady was having a lot of caffeine. And I said, well, what are you drinking now? And she said, I'm just going through 2 litre bottles of Iron Brew. But you know, you wouldn't necessarily think that Iron Brew is full of caffeine, but it's chock-a-block packed full of caffeine, as is things like Diet Coke and things like that as well. So it's just a little bit about education and learning together. Shutdowns, again, this is relating to the very bottom of the triangle, physiological needs. And exhaustion can lead to real, physical ill health. Sarah was saying about the migraines, the headaches, feeling unwell. That's a warning sign for me, certainly, that I have learned that when I start to get really headachy, I need to have at least a few hours break. Self-identity, changing yourself to fit in. And so a lot of what the hierarchy is about is actual coaching. It's not necessarily therapy, but perhaps this is an aspect of the model that is indeed therapy, in the sense of we're looking at some of those really deep, painful psychological concepts like who are you, why are you, so some of that will tie in with mood, anxiety, which maybe needs a bit more of a therapeutic approach to it. Relationships, challenges with social imagination, misunderstanding with a friend. Again, it's about strategy, education, trialling it with somebody who's a coach, and then going out to the real world, trying it out. Does it work? Does it not work? What do we need to change? What do we need to adapt? Keep pressing the wrong button. Personal safety. Again, lack of safety. Communication strategies. If you're not kind of sure how to deal with someone when they come knocking on your door at night, like Sarah had said, chap at the door, her strategy there is just, I don't need to deal with that, because she had a spouse, she's got a partner who would answer the door for her. And it's so funny, I'm exactly the same as Sarah. I just kind of kid on, I've got earphones in or something. I think we're now at a stage where my husband's like, don't worry, I'll get the door, because he knows it actually fills me full of panic. Don't know who it is, what do I say, so for me, my strategy is, if my husband's not home, I quickly duke into the living room and have a wee peek to see who it is. If it's somebody that I know, or if it's somebody that I think I can manage, then I will answer the door. But if it's not, I don't answer, and I used to feel incredibly guilty for that, but I don't anymore, because I know that's what I need to do for my my holistic needs as a person, so I don't get too stressed, so that's not going to have a knock-on effect on the rest of my day. So I know I'm just coming to the end of time, and I've attempted to go through some incredibly complex concepts and factors. I would encourage you to have a look at the website, but we have got some training and coaching on the hierarchy. We can either do training for the full model, or we can do it for specific areas. This is some of what we do: diagnostic assessment, therapy, and also we're engaged in academic research as well, and we're hoping to get some funds to develop a national therapy centre in Fife as a pilot over there, and hopefully we can demonstrate how effective it can really be. And here's the site where we want to build here. Katrina's been there many times, and it's probably not so bonny today with the weather. Oh, it was terrible this morning. Horses, goats.
You haven't met the goats yet.
You haven't met the goats yet. Katrina, you love goats as well. Ducks, hens, which is part of the animal therapy model we build into our work. Just quickly to say that I worked with an autistic young man who, after leaving inpatient hospital, struggled to have any small degree of trust with another human being. And, you know, those goats enabled us to gradually form a connection. It was easier for that person to look at a goat and stroke a goat and to talk to me through the goat than one-to-one. So animals are fab, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you so much for listening.